Hi, I'm Tyra, Mistress of the Imaginarium, and welcome to Mac and Me. What's Mac and Me, you ask? Well, back in the 1990s, there was a golden age of fantasy, action, adventure, syndicated television. Literally, I would take my home television hostage from about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, beginning with the adventures of Sinbad, and ending about 10 o'clock at night with Xena. The cornerstone of my afternoon was a little show called Highlander the series. Join me as I revisit all 6 seasons of the glue that held my geeky Saturday afternoons together. Each episode, I am going to be taking a deep dive into each season based on story, characters, guest stars, and fights. Each season will be given katanas on a scale of 1 to 5. And I will also be giving out what I call the Golden Clan MacLeod Broadsword, awarded to the what the fuck moments or episodes that I simply couldn't shake. So without further ado, and please be careful for spoilers, let's crack in. The series is a kind of requel of the Christopher Lambert movies of the same name. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is essentially that the creators go in and say, hey, remember those Highlander movies? Well, the story really doesn't count or exist in this universe, but Connor MacLeod does, and by the way, have you heard of his cousin Duncan? The new MacLeod is played by Adrian Paul, and I could tell you that there is no sentence that got my preteen panties soaked quicker than this one.
I am Duncan MacLeod, of the Clan MacLeod.
For those of you who are rusty, Highlander the series follows the adventures of Duncan MacLeod, a 400-year-old immortal who can only die if he is beheaded. And that is because he is part of what's called the game. And the game is the ongoing battle between all immortals, in which they are given the ability to heal, not die, sense one another, and have holy ground as their safe spot. But the series also takes time during what's called the gathering. And the gathering is essentially when immortals start popping out of the woodwork, fighting and beheading one another until only one is left. Hence the catchphrase, there can be only one. So the series examines immortality, and over the course of 6 seasons examines every facet of that existence, along with all the ways it can go right and wrong for those who have it. Asking the question essentially, what would you do if you knew that you would always have tomorrow? Season 1 particularly deals with the question of how immortals have an impact on the lives of the mortals around them. There are those like Duncan who try to live as normal as life as possible with friends and lovers, but are clearly burdened from all the losses they've experienced over the many centuries. Then you have those like mostly the villains of the week who could care less about all of that and just feel that mortals are simply toys for their own amusement. And then you have those who are the fun immortals who just want to have as much life and live life to the fullest until essentially their head is cut from their shoulders. Now the show initially tries to take a more reality-based, grounded approach like other fantasy shows of the time, like Forever Night, where you have this supernatural hero with a mysterious past who likes to interfere in human affairs but is trying to keep that under wraps from, the authorities or a nosy reporter. And it just doesn't gel here. But I can give credit and say that the showrunners seem to understand that and try to shift course over the episodes so that by mid-season they start focusing more on the immortals themselves. Story-wise, I give season 1 3 out of 5 katanas. You don't need to watch every episode unless you are a die-hard completionist, but there are hidden gems among the season, like my favorite episodes, The Lady and the Tiger and The Hunters, so skip around and have fun. It's the main characters of Highlander that gives the series its real firm foundation. In the pilot, we're introduced to Duncan and his mortal girlfriend, Tessa Noel. Then there's street kid Richie Ryan, who Duncan will eventually befriend and take in. Then you have Connor McLeod, and he's there to essentially bridge the gap between the movies and the show. And then our first villain of the week is the dude from Night Court. Now, I won't go into Duncan right here too much. Essentially, we're going to be spending 6 seasons with him, so I don't really have to. But I can say that right now at the beginning, Duncan is kind of a mess. Thing is because they try to keep this in this grounded, reality-based kind of like tone, what you have is an archetype rather than a character. And so Duncan comes off as this old man that is really just stuck in this young man's body, and he doesn't seem particularly thrilled about it, which I think is the point, but at the same time it doesn't really gel. Once again, this show doesn't gel. And then we have Tessa Noel. Now, I'm gonna admit right here, I've never quite liked Tessa. I just always just kind of found her, I just found her aggravating. And I never really understood why until during this rewatch, and I think it mainly has to do with the way she's written. Now, on paper, I have to say that Tessa does seem like she's one of those strong female characters. You have Tessa as she is this acclaimed artist, a curator. She's multilingual. What's cool about it, she's not 17 years old in this series. She's an actual grown woman, which is great to see. But that's where the problem lies. You see, on paper that looks great, but then they don't back her up with story. What usually happens in the course of the series is that essentially Tessa is there to be like, Duncan, I'm scared. Duncan, I'm worried. Please don't go. Or she is essentially kidnapped, or she is there to be jealous over any woman that shows the slightest inclination towards Duncan. And I just think that's a shame. It's a waste. It would have been great if the series could have just delved a little bit more emotionally on how Duncan's immortality affects Tessa, particularly on her accomplishments and how she feels she stacks up to that. Being that no matter how accomplished she is, she can't actually stack up to Duncan and all the centuries of life he has lived. Richie Ryan is the third character that rounds out this 3-man band on this series. He is introduced as this streetwise kid that breaks into Duncan and Tessa's antique shop, and they eventually befriend him and take him in. Now, mostly this season he is the comic relief, and then also kind of acts as a pseudo son for both Duncan and Tessa. They touch on his past a bit to give him a little bit more color and flavor, but at the same time he is so bumbling that you kind of wonder how it is that as a streetwise kid he survived this long. Overall, I give the main characters of Highlander Season 1 3 out of 5 katanas. They definitely have room to grow, and they're likable, but at the same time, like I said, they're not all there. The guest stars of Highlander Season 1 are so 90s, it actually hurts. You have Vanity, Joan Jett, the guy from Fine Young Cannibals for some reason, a baby Jason Isaacs, the Beastmaster, and then out of nowhere, holy shit, you have Peter DeLuise. And if you don't know who any of these people are, you're probably on the wrong channel. Of all the guest characters, I would say that Darius, played by Warner Stalker, Amanda, played by Elizabeth Grayson, and Fitz, played by Roger Daltrey, have the most impact. Darius is a 1,900-year-old former warrior who has turned from war to become a priest. And it's his friendship with Duncan, along with that of Connor MacLeod, that really gives Duncan his moral center and sense of duty. Now, both Fitz and Amanda, who are my personal favorites, come back seasons after season, and to me they are just a delight when they do. And for me, it's essentially because, like I said, Duncan is kind of insufferable right from the pilot, right? But when you have Amanda and Fitz, who are somewhat older than Duncan, come in, and they have a way of making it seem like, I guess when you meet your dad's friends from high school and your dad's been stoic and a do-right, but then they're able to come in and tell embarrassing stories, and it just has a way of kicking the soapbox that Duncan's standing on away, and it's just great. However, for Best Guest Star for season 1, I'm gonna have to go old school and go with Christopher Lambert as Connor MacLeod in the first episode. I know it's a little traditional, but it bridges the gap between the movies and the show, and Christopher Lambert just knocks it out of the park that episode. All in all, guest stars for me gets 5 out of 5 katanas. It was so amazing and awesome to see all of these guys pop up. It was like collecting Pokemon. 5 out of 5. Now, the thing that Highlander is most known for, and why everyone tunes in week after week, is essentially because of the sword fights. The season was divided into 2 segments. You had the Vancouver segment and the Paris segments, and the rest of the series would kind of follow that pattern thereafter. In season 1, the original sword master and coach was none other than badass Bob Anderson, who has done some movies you might have heard of, like The Princess Bride, The Mask of Zorro, and was also Darth Vader's stunt double in both The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Then for the Paris segment, he was essentially succeeded by Peter Diamond, who has a long list of accomplishments himself, including the first Highlander segment. So each and every week coming in, you're guaranteed at the very least, one great sword battle. For my money, even though you have a sword fight ending with a beheading with a ship's propeller, which is highly creative, I would go for my personal favorite in Band of Brothers, Duncan versus Grayson. In the episode Band of Brothers, Duncan has to go up against Grayson, who is a former student and immortal of his mentor Darius. The scene takes place in a sandpit of all places, and I just think I don't know what it is. It is just cinematic, and it looks like everyone involved wanted to take things up a notch. And now, the coveted Golden Clan MacLeod Wart Sword Award goes to the entire episode of For Evil's Sake, in which an immortal serial killer kills people dressed as a mime. I'm not joking. He dresses up as a mime to kill people as they laugh. And of course this happens in the Paris section because, the French. Could you imagine being killed by a mime? It's like it could be, of course, like the French or whatever, but like, could you imagine being killed by a mime? I'd just be like what the fuck, like seriously. This season, like most first seasons of TV shows that you revisit, is rough, even though the show finds its way halfway through the season, which is not too bad. It's right around Band of Brothers that Highlander switches gear from a more grounded retelling to actually just having fun with its premise. That being said, what Highlander's first season lacks in story, it makes up for it with sword fights and the power of awesome 90s cameos. I'm Tyra, Mistress of the Imaginarium, and it's been a pleasure.